Hi folks, Rick here. Welcome to my channel. All right folks, so today we're going to be kicking off a new video series, and that's really how to change like a motocross bike into a good competitive off-road bike. So if you're in the market for an off-road bike, there's a couple choices. Obviously, the best route, if you got the money, is to plop down for a new or near new one. There's a lot of choices out there to get something really good with the latest technology. Unfortunately, past the last couple of years, there really hasn't been a lot of choices for good off-road competitive bikes outside of like a KTM, and I'm not all that knowledgeable, so there may be other stuff out there. But when you get back in age, in the more affordable price range, you kind of got your choice of a motocross bike. If you can find an older KTM, at least in my area, they're almost non-existent, and when you do find them, they're super pricey. Or the other choice is to try to do some type of a trail bike. A lot of those tend to be smaller CCs, and may just not live up to the task there. But today, what I'm going to do is kind of go through how to take an older dirt bike. This is a 2013 KFX 450. It's not super old, but it's still in that motocross area. And so some of the videos you've probably seen out there, magazine articles and stuff like that, the real popular thing to do is to buy one of these things off of Craigslist and then drop $8,000 or $9,000 with it in it, and then you come out with something spectacular. That's not what this is going to be. Those fun things are fun to watch. It's just not reality for the most of us. If you've got $8 or $9 grand to plop into a used dirt bike, buy a new one. Don't try to fix it up. If you get an old 2000 era CR250, at the end of the day, you're going to end up with a 2000 era CR250. And so that's a lot of money to spend in something like that versus just going out and buying a new one. Nothing wrong with those bikes. It's just at the end of the day, you're still going to end up with what you got. So on this one right here, I'm starting off with a 2013. I'm going to end up with a 2013. 2013 technology, can't get rid of that. So we're going to kind of do this on, not necessarily a budget build, but it is going to be budget. And before I get started, the very first thing to keep in mind is, for a good competitive off-road bike, the only thing you really need is a dirt bike. So you could go buy, a 2000 CR250 and you're good to go. All you need is something to go out there and ride. You could even have an old trail bike. It doesn't necessarily require anything special. However, most of us, when we buy something, like me, my purpose of buying this thing here is I want to buy it, get something as good as I can, and then have some money left over to spend on, making it better. And that's really what my list of stuff here I want to go over with you today is to how you can make your motocross bike a lot better off-road bike. So let's go ahead and get started. I kind of got this into basically 4 different categories of stuff here. And so the very first thing I want to kind of go through is protection. Your motocross bikes really have no off-road protection. They're on groom tracks. There's no obstacles, no rocks, no logs, no trees everywhere, and that kind of stuff. And so a stock motocross bike is really stripped of a lot of its protection to save on weight. And so you really need to go back and kind of put some of this stuff on to make your bike a lot more usable. You're not going to tear stuff up if you're going over logs and rocks or in through the trees and stuff like that. So a couple things to think about here is a good set of wraparound handguards. And so I don't have any handguards on this one here, but you want the full kind that have metal wraparound from here all the way to the front. They do a good job of not just protecting your hand, protecting it from trees, saplings, roost from, and rocks and stuff like that. But they also, if you dump the bike over, it keeps you from snapping off all your levers and screwing up your grips and handlebars like that. So a good set of wraparound handguards. It's kind of a basic thing you should really look at, especially for a dirt bike. Some other things here, again, you might want to look at is a front rotor guard. So a good front rotor guard there is going to protect your front rotor from getting mud, sticks, that kind of stuff's going to help from getting it dinged up, help from getting rocks in there. It's also going to protect your master cylinder from getting dinged and dented, so that's a good investment there as well. Radiator braces. So, you're probably going to be dropping your bike a little bit more often than you'd like to, especially me. But you know, if you dump the bike over and it hits here, your radiator is just going to smash, and those are expensive. So you want to get a good set of radiator braces. This actually has some type of a radiator brace, but I haven't took it apart to see whether or not it's good enough or not. But you darn sure look for a good quality set of radiator braces there. That'll protect it. And again, if you turn the bike over or something like that, you can just get on it and go again, and you don't have to worry about all your radiators dying out. Probably one of the most important things there is a good quality skid plate. Now this one here, you can't see it there, but it's got a plastic skid plate that goes in between the frame rails. That's really just there to protect from rocks and stuff and flinging up under there, but it's not there really for any type of protection. It's not going to really do you a darn thing for going off-road. You want a full-on skid plate that protects your frame, that's actually thick enough to protect the bottom of your motor. If you hit something down there, you want it to be able to rest it on top of rocks in logs and build a slide over top of it there. So you need something there, a full cradle. You also want something there that kind of is full coverage here that comes out, protects your side cases a little bit, protects your water pump on this particular one. On your other side, you got your stator cover there. And so some of those ones there are full wraparound type of protection, and you want to get something like that. If you got an aluminum frame bike like these things, just something, I'm not an expert on this. Here comes the freeway. I'm not an expert on this thing here, but most of these aluminum frames, especially the Japanese bikes, their frames are designed to flex. That's how they work, and that's, you know, that gives them the proper characteristics and the handling and all that kind of stuff. If you just sit there and bolt a solid piece of aluminum to this thing, that can mess that up. So a lot of the aluminum skid plates you see out there will come with some rubber mounts to prevent that, or if you get a poly skid plate, you don't have to worry about that. But just keep that in mind depending on your dirt bike if that's going to be an issue for you. Make sure you get something that'll give you a little bit of give if that's necessary for your bike. But skid plate there, that's almost got to be, before you do any type of decent off-roading, that's one of the first things you should really look at getting at. Along with that, if you got linkage, a good linkage guard, the bolts on the bottom of your skid plate will be very good as well. A pipe guard. So I don't know if they really make a whole lot for the 450 bikes, and they're not that big of a deal, but your two-stroke bikes typically have their big pipe coming off here. And so when those pipes are like that, they have a tendency to hit the logs when you're going over them. They're also stick out a lot farther there, so they're easier to dent, and they're also very expensive there. So a good pipe guard, if you got a two-stroke pipe, definitely a good recommendation, save you some money there. And the last thing I really got for protection, and this isn't an exhaustive list, there's all sorts of other things, but it's really a rear rotor guard. So this has got, came with this piece of plastic there. That's not, from an off-road standpoint, it's basically decoration there. I don't know what it's really doing, probably keeping some mud off there, but it's not offering any protection there. So a good rear rotor guard as well. All right, so that's pretty much what I got for protection. Again, there's probably a bunch of other stuff to get. Look it up for your bike, see what out there, see what might look good for you, what might help you. I know sometimes they've got, you know, carbon fiber side plates and that kind of stuff. There's a lot of things you can get on there, but again, certainly get your darn skid plate and a good linkage guard. Those are probably your two biggest ones. After that, kind of go as you like. So the next area here that I think is really important on an off-road bike from a motocross bike is your suspension. Suspension is everything regardless of what you do. If you want motocross, you want a good motocross suspension. You want off-road, you want a good off-road suspension. That's just how it is. Even if you buy a brand new bike, chances are that suspension may not even work for you right off the lot. So having something done, revalved and stuff like that, is an option here. So I really got two different things here you can really do. So from a suspension standpoint like that, this is designed for motocross especially. So it's going to be a lot stiffer. It is fully adjustable. This one, thankfully for me on mine, is pretty much adjusted for my weight, so I don't have to really do much with that. But you either got a choice basically of a full revalve, and that's really your best choice. May not be the best choice for your budget, but get the best suspension you can, having one that's professionally done, having it all either resprung or especially revalved and set up specifically for off-road, specifically for you, where you ride and how you ride, makes your suspension night and day. On my other race bike, my Raptor back there, and yeah, I call both of them bikes, just have to get over that. But on that one there, I've got a full custom suspension on there, all the difference in the world. This one right here, I've taken it out a few times, almost jars my teeth out of the darn thing. I'm dialing it in a little bit better, but taking it out, having it revalve, that's the only way you're really going to get a good solid suspension out of there. That's obviously costs you money. The second approach is really a DIY approach. This is actually what I'm doing with this bike right now, and I've done it on my other bike, my Raptor there for a while, but you can take your existing setup as it is, even though it's not set up for off-road, and you can go out there and readjust all the suspension and make it a heck of a lot better than it is right now. Is it going to be like a full revalve? No, it never will. This does not have the components in it to be a good off-road suspension, but you can make it a heck of a lot better, and a heck of a lot better is just that, a heck of a lot better. And so how you do this thing here, I'm going to give you, there's videos out there. I've got some setting up on my suspension setup and stuff on my Raptor, which will really show you how to do sock setup on there. But all you want to do on this thing is take all your clickers and all your settings, write them down. If you got air forks, write down the pressure. Write everything at where it is today, and that way if you screw something up, all you got to do is set it back to where it was and you're right back to where you were. You really can't screw it up. And so once you've got it all set and down, take out, either a wrench or a screwdriver, whatever yours takes, and decide what your bike's doing as best as you can, and just simply make an adjustment. If you don't know what adjustment to make, pick one and make it. You only want to make one adjustment at a time. So if you adjust your front fork compression, just do front fork compression. Don't do front and back at the same time. Do one adjustment and then do the eye doctor approach. Is it better A? Is it better B? If B's better, you've just made an improvement. That's all it is. Make another adjustment, make more of an adjustment. That's all you got to do is go out there. It's not a 1 hour job. This will take you weeks, months, depending on how much you ride. On my Raptor there, it probably took me 3 or 4 months of riding and racing to get it dialed in. The reason for that is not time spent out there. It takes you a while to duplicate all the scenarios. I'll be out there and all of a sudden I'll hit something. It's like, man, I didn't notice this thing. Now I'm starting to bottom out. I wasn't bottoming out when I was doing it before, but now I'm doing something where I am bottoming out. So now I got to make a slight adjustment or what have you. So it's just a matter of putting time on your suspension, riding and paying attention. A lot of times I go out and forget to do it, which is a big problem, but paying attention to what your suspension doing, carrying your tools with you, make a couple adjustments, write them down, and then is it better A, is it better B? You can take your stock suspension and make it a lot better. I've already made drastic improvements on this thing. It's not where it needs to be. I've got more adjustments to do, but it is a heck of a lot better than when I bought it. And again, hasn't cost me anything but time. Now, will I do a revalve on this? I don't know. Right now I'm doing the DIY approach. But these first two categories here, protection and suspension there, you want to protect your bike to make sure, you don't destroy it, and you want suspensions to make sure the bike doesn't destroy you. Those are your two big categories I would say you really want to focus on. So after that, I got a category here called rideability. It's kind of a hodgepodge of stuff here. So first thing you want again, this is almost like suspension, is you want some type of a tire that's specifically designed for how and where you ride. Getting a very specific tire for where you ride makes all the difference in the world. Now, pros and that kind of stuff, they'll change tires at every different venue because every different venue is slightly different, and there's probably a tire that's better for that. And if you can find that tire, that gives you an edge on everybody else. For the rest of us, we're kind of one tire and that's it. That's all I can afford. But I ride in pretty much the same type of terrain all the time, and you research that out, ask who you're buying your tire from, what's the best based on where you ride, ask your friends. If you race, go to the racetrack, figure out what everyone's using for that type of terrain where you normally ride and get a specific tire. It's not necessarily a motocross tire or off-road tire, it's getting one that's specific for your ride in your area. It makes all the difference in the world. The other thing on these ones here is on the rear. Off-road bikes typically have 18-inch tires and wheels. Motocross have 19. So the difference is on these things, an 18 and a 19-inch rim are basically the same height, the outside diameter. The difference is in the tallness of the sidewall. Your 18-inch wheel can have an inch taller sidewall. That gives you better bump absorption, makes it a lot smoother, allows you to run your pressure a little bit lower, gives you some better traction. So that's something there to look into. Right now, I've got a 19-inch on mine. I just bought this bike, and so I've got a lot of other things to do. So what I've decided here to do on mine initially here is to stick with a 19-inch wheel and then I will probably reassess that down the road. When it's time to replace tire, maybe I'll get to an 18-inch at that time. But look at that, maybe an 18-inch rim on the rear. That'll make things ride a lot smoother. And that's an issue with motocross bikes. You want them to ride smooth, so that can make a difference for you. Sorry, an O-ring chain. So, you know, putting an O-ring chain on the back, something you want to do. Motocross bikes do not have O-ring or X-ring chains, which predominantly are now. They have really thin, lightweight chains that have very low rotating mass, very low friction, and that gives you more speed. They do not last for off-road. You get out there in some nasty sand, rocks, and mud, those things will wear out on you. You'll be constantly replacing. So get a good quality X-ring chain, and that'll help you out. Okay, some other things. This is kind of some nice things here. Is some type of a shock-absorbent set of handlebars on there. And so you can get, I've got on my Raptor over there, a shock and vibe set, which is basically a handlebar suspension system there that just takes all the jolts and stuff out of there. You can get some flex bars. Both of those options there are kind of pricey. Not super pricey. They're, you know, $300 area or something like that. But that's still quite a lot of money. Steering stabilizer. Those things really help to keep the jerkiness out of there. Those are some good upgrades as well. Again, a little bit on the pricey side, but steering stabilizer can make all the difference in the world. Larger fuel tank. So motocross bikes typically have tiny fuel tanks. They run for 20 minutes and that's it. They go back to the pits. You know, so some of your hair scrambles there are a couple hours long. If you're just out going on a day trip or something like that, you're going to be riding, you know, a lot more miles. You're probably going to need an upgraded tank. I've rode mine for quite a bit. I think based on my speeds, which is pretty slow, that I'm probably going to get away with this tank just fine. So I'm going to stick with this until I run into an issue. At least for now, but most of us there, you know, especially if you're going to use it for, you know, some long distance trail riding and stuff like that, you're going to have to invest in an oversized tank because these tiny ones here just aren't going to get it for you. You might look into a kickstand. There is no kickstand on these things here. That can be a pain out there, always having to drop your bike or not be able to get off till you can find a tree or a bush to lean it against. And then, you know, also, if you're going to just do this for trail riding or want to do some trail riding there, you might need a spark arrestor of some sort. And so this one right here, muffler here does not have a spark arrestor. I don't know if they make one. I actually don't know what kind it is. I don't think it's the factory one. It almost looks like an FMF, but I can't tell. So this winter, which is getting close, as you can tell by my jacket, it's nasty cold outside, and it's brown jacket season. So you're going to see a lot of video with this on. But when I take it off this winter, I'll do some research, try to find out what that one is. So those are a lot of the rideabilities there, just to kind of make it nicer for yourself, make it more enjoyable to ride, and you know, less, you know, killing yourself when you're out there and, you know, feeling like you've been ran over by a truck. The last area here that I got is really motocross characteristics. That's what I'm calling it. And that's really things that, you know, your bike was designed. This was a motocross bike. It does motocross exceptionally well, but there's a lot of bad things about that we need to kind of get rid of to do good off-roading. So the very first one here I kind of got is potentially, and this is not always an issue, but it's not necessarily just with motocross bikes, but you can have your engine running hot. So these bikes here are designed to basically just be pinned wide open for 20 minutes, high rate of speed, high airflow. You don't have any problems. But if you ever watch motocross bikes and see on one of those mud days when it starts getting muddy, all of them are overheating. That's an issue. When you're riding off-road, you're going in those slow technical conditions, you're going to be in mud, you're going to be in a lot of those conditions, and so you need to be able to, you know, have some better cooling on there. And so there's a few options. The biggest option I would recommend for any bike you get is to run like a high performance coolant, like an engine ice. They're more efficient, they cool better, they have a higher boiling point, and then couple that with a high pressure radiator cap. Those combination of those two will keep the water in the radiator instead of just boiling over and blowing out in the dirt. And so if you can keep the water in there, it gives it a better chance of cooling. They'll actually run cooler. I installed this on my Raptor and I've not had any issues with that at all. It used to run hot. The fan used to come on quite a bit more. Now it comes on quite a bit less just with those two options. Those two are cheap things to do and will solve a lot of your problems. After that, though, it gets to be, you know, a little bit expensive there. So one thing you can do is try a high performance water pump. I haven't tried one of those, but those offer more water flow. Those will probably help as well. And then from there, you're looking into some custom stuff. So one thing you can do, should be pretty cheap, but it's going to be some ingenuity for yourself, is to figure out if you can fashion some type of an overflow bottle. So right now, with your high pressure radiator cap on here, that's going to basically keep that water in there and keep it from overflowing to start with. But if it really, really gets hot, having an overflow bottle is basically going to allow it to blow that water into the overflow bottle. And then if you sit there for a few minutes or what have you, if you're pulling your bike out, getting unstuck, when the bike cools down, it basically sucks that water right back in and you're good to go. Without an overflow bottle, it's just going to go on the ground. Now you have no water and you're pushing it. So most of your off-road bikes are typically going to have some type of an overflow bottle on them. Again, I don't know where you put one on here. I've got some room in my air box. I'll have to look. I think I need to wash my air filter. I might be able to fashion something in there. I'm going to just kind of look around this thing over the winter. Just kind of look around and see if I can see some small bottles or something like that that might fit. That's a pretty cheap thing to do. That will also keep you back on the road. Other than that, the next thing is to try to fashion some sort of a fan. So that's going to depend on what kind of electrical system your bike has. Does it have enough juice to run a fan? Do you know how to even install a fan and do the wiring without having a battery and all that stuff? If you got a battery and electric start, you're in good shape, but most of your older motocross bikes don't have any of this thing. So I'm not positive yet. I've kind of toyed around with the idea. I think it's possible to do something on this bike, but go with the better quality radiator or the coolant and a high pressure cap. That's likely going to take care of your issue. The other big thing here on motocross bikes is the throttle response. They basically, if you watch them on TV, it's basically all throttle or no throttle. And that's the way they are. And for off-roading, a lot of times we need to slow down and have some finesse. We got to go through mud. You want to be able to have some finesse on that to get some traction. And that's where these things really kind of suck. A lot of your older two-strokes, you're either on the power or no power. And so what we got to do is try to get rid of that motocross stuff. And so there's a couple things there you can do on it. So if you got a fuel-injected bike like this one here, I've got 3 different maps I can run. You can get a programmer and do more stuff, but it comes with 3 different maps, just like plugs you can plug in the darn thing. Unfortunately, it's not like on the handlebars like the new ones, but it has an aggressive, a standard, and basically a low-power one there. And so I've got the low-power one. It seems to take the edge off quite a bit, so I'm kind of happy with that. So I've made some improvements by swapping with that. If you don't have something like that, if you got a 2-stroke, you could try adjusting your power valves. Sometimes they got adjustable power valves. You can kind of tame it down to where it's just not such a quick hit. It kind of starts off there. You'll have a little bit more low end, and then on your top end kind of suffers. But at least you'll have a little bit more throttle response. You can kind of play with that. On the 2-strokes also, you can sometimes get a different pipe. Some of the motocross bikes are designed, the power band's designed for high RPM, and you can get one that's actually designed for lower RPM as well. Those are obviously more pricey, having to replace a pipe, but that's some things you can do on a good 2-stroke there to kind of help with that throttle response. Another thing you can do is install a flywheel weight. So putting a heavy weight on your flywheel basically creates centrifugal force that zaps out your throttle response because it just adding that weight. It also keeps it from stalling a little bit too as a side benefit there. So adding a good flywheel weight is a good option. Another thing to look into here also, and it's something I'm probably going to do on mine, is a progressive throttle on these things. So these have got very short throw throttles on them, and they're linear. You open at 50%, the throttle's open 50. You open at 75, the throttle's open 75, and that's what it is. But there's very little finesse on the darn thing. You can get a progressive throttle, and what that does is when you twist the throttle, let's say 50%, on those ones there, it's only opening the throttle maybe 30%. But when you get it to 75%, it's pretty much back to 75%. So instead of being a round linear throttle, it's kind of got a flat spot and then it's a loop on the darn thing. So you get, for the first 50% of your throttle, you end up with a lot more throttle response because it's just when you're twisting it there, it's not twisting your actual throttle all that much as you're moving your hand. So it's you got a lot more throttle response in the 0 to 50%, and then after 50%, you're still the same, so you're not having to really twist the throttle to get wide open on a thing like that. So I think that's going to give it a lot more throttle response. Down low, it's going to give me a little bit more finesse, so I think that's a pretty good option, something to look into. And one last thing, this is on the pricier side, but super, super nice. We'll have to look into it for this bike, and that's a Recluse clutch. I got one on my race bike over there. Absolutely love it. It is so nice. Especially if you, the biggest thing, I use it for a lot of different things. It allows you to kind of not have to focus on shifting your bike so much there. You can just drop it in third and, you know, what have you, and just leave it there. You're not worried about it. If you're hopping logs, you don't have to worry about stalling. It takes the edge off that one. But for a motocross bike, and what I use it for there too a lot of time is you can upshift. And when you upshift the bike, like when I go through mud and stuff like that, like Ironman, if you look at last year's Ironman video, and if I remember, I'll put a link to it there. This was just horrendous mud race. It was just terrible on the thing there. But for me, I necessarily didn't have any problem. I upshifted most of the time. I was running in third and fourth gear. What that done is that took all the power out of my bike. So it really, when you gave it the throttle or you bumped the throttle, it didn't have enough juice to really spin. And so what that allowed it to do, it allowed my tires to sink into the mud, grab, and I had great traction all the time on the thing there. And so with a motocross bike like this thing here, you can upshift the same way. That's going to kill your throttle response, and that's what you want to do. So that way when you give the bike, it's not just snapping you all by, it's just sitting there bogged down, but it's also not stalling. So a Recluse clutch is a really good option for you. We'll see how it goes on this one here on the bike. They are an investment, but boy, once you got one, they are super, super nice. That will also help you. The last item I got here may be an issue or may not. It was for me, and that's the gearing. First gear on this bike here, and I know other people who's got this one, first gear was super fast. And for off-roading, doing some technical type of stuff there, it just wasn't optimal whatsoever there. You're just constantly on the clutch all the time, either, you know, working the clutch and the throttle just to go normal type of tight trails and stuff like that. And so that's just a lot of extra work. And so for me, the gearing was off. And so when it comes time to change the sprockets and stuff like that, one thing you can do on there is change the gearing on your sprockets there to help out. Now, what I ended up doing on this one here, and I'll have an upcoming video on, is I actually lowered my countershaft. I'm still kind of playing around a little bit, but I dropped a tooth on my countershaft sprocket, and that basically slowed down first gear. It's much, much better now, and I think it's actually in the good range. However, what that does, when you kind of lower your gear ratio, if you will, make it a lower gear, it gives you more throttle response. And so we had on here throttle response. It's got too much now. It's a problem, and so dropping your gears makes that worse. But some of these other items I listed here are going to more than compensate for that thing there. So I dropped a gear on this thing here. Now it's making it where it's a little bit more in my comfort zone. Again, that's personal preference. It's probably going to vary with what bike you got and everything else. But that was an issue with this one here. I dropped a gear. I think I fixed that one. It did go a little bit worse on my throttle response, but actually when I swapped out my my fuel map on here, it actually feels better overall. So I think I've already compensated for it. And once I add a few more things to the list here, I think I'll be good. So that's really it. Got a list. I'll see if I can copy this into the YouTube video description there if you want to look at it. Again, the only thing you really need to go out there and have fun and be competitive is a dirt bike. Everything else after that is optional, but again, most of us like to tinker with these things, make them better, make it easier on ourselves. You want to go out there and enjoy yourself and again, not feel like you're getting beat up. So there's a lot of these things you can want to add, but you know, again, probably focus there. If you're going to start on something there, make sure your bike's fully protected, especially your skid plate. That's going to be like #1 item on there. Then you're going to want to work on your suspension. Again, you can work on your suspension yourself. Don't be afraid of that. It's easy to do. Write the settings down. If you screw it up, turn them back to where you started. You're right back to where you started. No harm, no foul. But you can do that. You can make big improvements on your suspension for free. And so there's not a lot of money to spend to make good improvements on your bike. Then as you get going, you can start pulling some other items off the list. A lot of these you can do pretty cheaply. Some of them you can just do without spending any money, just through adjustments. Other things are a little bit more of an investment depending on what you want to get there. So that's it. Hope you enjoy it there. We're going to be taking, again, I'm going to start a new video series. I don't know what it's going to be called. It's basically motocross to off-road dirt bikes. I'll have a playlist out there, and then we're going to have videos on a lot of this stuff as I go. So as I start making these upgrades to my bike, I'll start videoing them, and I'll put them out there so you guys can actually see what I've decided to do, as well as what those parts look like and how you install them on a motocross bike. So with that, I hope to see you out there. Again, if I add value to you, please hit that subscribe button, hit the notification so you can start seeing the upcoming videos out there on this one. But it'll probably be a lot of brown jacket video series here over the winter as I get them going. Some of these ones here that are going to require testing, though, will probably come out later because I'll need to actually, you know, it's going to be snowing here probably within a month, so it'll probably cut my riding down. So anywho, that's it. Hope you enjoy this video. Take care, and I'll see you out there.